All right, so we are going to continue moving forward. Now, as you all know, we are in the third day of February, right? And so 2024 is off to a great start. But one of the things that I'm sure we all want to know is what are the trends for 2024? There's a lot of things that are projected and a lot of things that have been conversation, but we want to know fact versus fiction. Well, to help us in kind of having that conversation, we have DAS Technologies, and they're going to talk about just that, 2024 trends, fact versus fiction, and an in-depth conversation on CDXP and AI. So to help us do that, I'd like to welcome up Alexi Vinieri, who is the co-founder and CEO of DAS Technology. And joining her is Cliff Banks, who is the founder of Autovate and the Banks Report. Are you both ready? Come on up. Let's give them a round of applause. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon. My name is Cliff Banks. I'm the founder of the Banks Report and Autovate, which is a conference focused on investment in automotive retail. And I have with me here Alexi Vinieri, who is the CEO and co-founder of DAS Technology. Welcome, and great to have all of you here with us today.
Thank you, Cliff.
Yes.
I'm excited. What a great show so far. It's been wonderful.
Yes. The NADA, I think it's, I don't know how many years for me. I think it's my 25th one, so they all start blurring together over time.
I go 24.
Oh, you're going to go 24?
I've done
That's
24.
right, yes. Well, let's jump into this, Alexi. DAS is focused on really the consumer journey, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what the focus is and
What we are
yes.
today. Well, I'm so fortunate that, this industry is amazing. I see some of our incredible clients here today. Hey, guys. Hello. And partners. So I think that aside from the fact I worked in automotive tech for quite a few years, I actually was really fortunate to work for the Van Tuyl Group, if any of you remember the Van Tuyl Group, before they sold to Berkshire. And I think being part of a large group and actually vetting a lot of vendors myself and coming to these shows and working with all of our GMs, I really got focused on the data and the customer experience. And this is going back like 14 years. And that is when we founded, originally it was called Digital Airstrike. And it was really basic and really simple, Cliff. We were just, let's listen to consumers. At the time, dealers didn't really even know there were online reviews. We were the first to ever do the very first dealer survey. So we plugged into the DMS and just started finding out about how the experience was for both sales and service. And from there, we just listened and realized there were gaps in the process, as there always is, with any business. Great vendors, great technology. We partner with about 206 other vendors in our space. But we're like, where are the gaps? Where can we use technology to help, first and foremost, really our dealers have an easier time, right? You don't need another, dashboard to log into. Nobody wants just reporting that doesn't give you something actionable to do with the data, right? And that's where we started. And now we're just so fortunate. We've partnered with some amazing entrepreneurs, including yourself. We rebranded as DAS Technology at last year's NADA. And we're really 100% focused on how do we make things easier for both the consumer, so they get better, more timely information in a professional way about the OEM or the dealer, but mostly how do we help the dealers also just have an easier time with it? So it shouldn't replace the humans that we have in our industry. I mean, you are all just such great, people, and you're people, right? That's what our industry is about. So how do we make it easier for our dealers as well?
So our industry is notorious for buzzwords, and certainly as vendors like driving and promoting these buzzwords. One of them is CDP or CDXP, and I know that years ago, conversations with you, Alexi, you were already talking about this concept long before it even became a buzzword. But from your perspective, what's the myth, or what's the truth behind CDXP?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot of people here at the show talking about it, right? A couple years ago, it was digital retailing. Digital retailing, everyone's going to buy everything fully online. But CDXP, in the simplest form, it talks about being able to take data and do something with it so that you can automate some step in communications with the consumers to make it easier for them to get information. And it's not a new concept. Lots of other industries, I came from hospitality, I was involved in sports marketing. A lot of other industries might already have something like a CDXP that plugs in let's say a Salesforce. And we've just never really had that tool. So it's been exciting for us to develop it over the years and really just find all the gaps where somehow a lead might not close for your store, or a consumer just doesn't have a good experience, so they spend less with you even if they still visit your dealership. So how do we normalize the data? Very simple, between usually your CRM and DMS, even though there's other data points, right? You've got other vendors. How do we make sure that we actually know all the touch points that consumer's engaged with your store, and that we try to keep them in the funnel? You don't want a leaky bucket in your sales process, whether it's for sales or service. And then how do we just automate some communication so it's appropriate to them at the right time?
What are some of the challenges from the vendor side, and that you think that you think dealers should be aware of and know about in terms of leveraging the CDXP?
It's a great question. First and foremost, we 100% believe that data is the dealer's. So if somebody's going to try to take your data and they want to take it into their system, and then you have to pay them, or they're going to charge other vendors to access your data, I'm sorry, I think that's BS, and I would be very concerned about that. I would be concerned about compliance as well. So something you want to ask any vendor is opt-outs. Are they following all the consumer privacy laws? There's a lot of things changing with both email and, let's say, texting. You have to ask the right questions. We prefer, in the way we work with our dealers, we don't even keep your data. So we will go in and we will help cleanse it and actually do identity resolution. That's another big thing.
Okay.
So you might have one individual has 4 email addresses over the last 5 years. They've given you different emails. Their spouse, their partner might be in the system, but it's really one record for all real purposes. And you just want to make sure that you've got a full way to really do that resolution, and also know all the steps that they've engaged with your store, so you're only sending the most relevant information at that moment. The last thing you want is to ask somebody to buy a car when they just bought from you last week, unless they do have a second car in the garage, and you know that because they serviced with you. And maybe they serviced with you and there was a decline service. You probably want to market that as the next thing before you launch into some other messaging that wouldn't make sense to them.
Right. Now, as you start putting all this consumer data and customer data, ownership data together, a big part of that is integration. How difficult is that? I mean, and I was writing about that 25 years ago. Has it gotten better? Or are there still challenges?
Yes and no. Another great question, Cliff. So in some ways, I would say yes.
Yeah.
I think that there's been some new standards created, and we've been really fortunate. We're a little long in the tooth here. So this company that we have now, DAS Technology, we started 14 years ago. So we've had the time to not only do data integration with, like, say, the OEMs or the CRM systems, DMS, the people that take your vehicle photos, whatever it might be. We've got 206 people that we've worked with to create certain standards and make sure it's integrated. And more importantly, you kind of need a quarterback there. So if something breaks or a feed stops, we like to be the advocate for our clients, to be their partner and say, hey, we don't mind calling your route at whatever other vendor. We'll work on the solution together, because the last thing I think our dealers should worry about is trying to get all their data integration partners or vendors together to mess with that. And it is our problem. Even if it's not our side that
Right.
caused something to break, we want to work with that other vendor so the dealer doesn't have to mess with it.
Right.
So I think in some ways, I've found, at least for us, it's gotten better. I think where it can go awry is sometimes there's people that are new to our industry. They think they've got it figured out. They don't know about, for example, OEM standards, brand guidelines, the digital assets that any vendor should be using the right way. They might jump into something really crazy too fast, like let's integrate the data with ChatGPT, and then just let it go wild. So it's in some ways better, but I think it can go rogue pretty quickly if you're not working with a trusted partner.
Right. And so let's talk about AI for a couple of minutes. I've always thought, certainly as ChatGPT became hit the ground running last last year, right around this time, it seems that opportunity or potential for it to go wild, and I was playing around with it quite a bit in my job and was getting crazy data. Some of it made no sense. In fact, I asked who Cliff Banks was, and they said I was a journalist for another publication that I had never been a journalist for, and it actually created a false link using that company's URL architecture and putting my name into it. So it was going above and beyond just saying incorrect information. So that potential is there. So how do we keep the guardrails? How does DAS keep the guardrails up? I would imagine it's got to be focused on your data, the dealership-specific data, not going out wild into the internet, and providing some very strict guardrails on the usage.
Yeah, well, we're fortunate. One of our VCs, and again, they've been working with us for 14 plus years, they're also on the board and a VC of ChatGPT. So a couple years ago, we knew about it before it was coming down the pipe, and we also knew about some of the potential challenges. So we've been in the beta groups to like have a hackathon and try to break it with our developers. I think that kind of concerned us early on before anybody even knew it was a thing. So we've been very, very mindful to actually build our own guardrails and to make sure we've got a vetting process. And it's not necessarily new for our team. We always think of ourselves as air traffic controllers. We never have fully automated anything other than matching VINs to alternate vehicles and serving that up to consumers. Because that's like a vehicle, it's data. You like this vehicle, we can serve up, these other similar trims, price points. But when it came to that conversational AI and engaging with a connected consumer, aside from the fact you don't want something to ever hurt the reputation of the dealer or try to sell you a car for $1, right? Something crazy.
Right.
We heard about that. You just don't want to lose that consumer. So I talk about the connected consumer.
Yes. I always talk about the connected car, and she comes back at me, Cliff, it's the connected customer, it's not the connected vehicle. And I think it's...
I think the vehicle is a medium.
Yes.
It'd be like saying the connected chat or the...
Okay.
It's another communication channel now. The vehicles obviously track what you do, can communicate with the consumer. But I've always been passionate about you want to connect with that human through all the channels. If you suddenly annoy them because you've got some weird chatbot going rogue, they may take you off their shopping list. Doesn't matter they service with you, maybe they bought a car from you 5 years ago. I want them connected and loyal to our dealers, our OEMs. And the only way you can do that is to have guardrails in every one of the technology vendors you work with, but also know the path that consumer's been on and get all those data systems talking to each other. You want to know, did they dial a number on a service mailer? You want to know if they asked about a certain vehicle or they clicked on something online, and you want to have that picture, but you're not going to be sitting there looking at all these dashboards. Do you have a vendor or a system or a tool that will aggregate that in a timely way and let you know and suggest up the next conversation or offer or incentive that you should, serve up in whatever medium, text or email, to make them stay connected to you and continually want to buy service with you, et cetera. So we're very much, again, we have these air traffic controllers that we have our own systems we don't normally show, where it pings and shows us like a map. It's almost like airplanes. That's what we call them, air traffic controllers, right? You got to know what all the planes are doing, even if they're not your planes, because you don't want anybody running into each other and someone getting hurt. And that's kind of what we think about with the consumer, because it's such a waste. Our dealers spend so much money on advertising. There's incentive dollars at risk. You miss some sort of, goal for sales or even service ROs to keep the business going if sales are down. There's so many things at risk that you do not want to lose someone out of that funnel.
Let's go in a different direction. DAS just recently, this week, released the results of a study from the fourth quarter. There were some interesting results. I say interesting. I don't mean surprising, because it didn't surprise me, but I think one of the results was digital retailing, and just the percentage of consumers who actually went through or want to go through the full process digitally. And why don't you share with us some of those results and the insights from
Sure. Again, 14 years of listening to consumers, what they liked, what they didn't, even if they bought or they didn't buy. When everyone was doing the last buzzword, digital retailing, we never said we were digital retailing. We said we're in the the customer experience business. We can help and nurture and influence, but we were not convinced that consumers wanted to fully do everything on a tool. Maybe if you're shipping a car and it's another state, and okay, I get it. So, it's been a question we've asked for a while, and in the last 6 months, we surveyed 7,000 car buyers and servicers, not predisposed to anything, other than we were fortunate with opt-ins to know they bought or serviced. All brands, all across the country, and it was from just the last 5-6 months, very recent. One of the questions was, how likely are you or were you, and we didn't even know if they did fully transact online, to ever want to fully automate the car buying process online? What percent? And it was only 2.4%. But they said they might want to do some of it. So that was also interesting, right? They were willing and wanted to engage the way they wanted. So maybe they do want to be on your website and look, but they don't want to give you that email or phone number because they're going to get 5 calls in 2 days and 20 emails from that aggressive salesperson that got to make quota. So they won't ever even tell you they're looking. So how do we uncover them? And we actually also launched a tool where we can uncover, it's about 55% of the consumers that don't de-cookie on your website, we can match to an email. But again, relevant communication, or else you don't want them to fall out. Only if they're on like a VDP, we will just thank them for visiting that VDP and see if they want more information about that vehicle or something similar. So again, appropriate communication. But they don't want to go fully through the whole thing online. They actually want to talk to your team. You guys know that. They want maybe a test drive, right? They want even, home, 24-hour test drive at home. But they're never going to give you that chance if you annoy them, if you harass them. They just don't have the patience anymore for it.
Right.
You'll never even get their contact information. So I think you absolutely want technology to nurture and get them through the process, but only 2.4% wanted to go fully online.
Right. Which is not surprising, I think. Well, we've heard from the dealers, even from 2020 when the pandemic hit, it's a very small number or percentage of customers who are actually going through the entire process or even want to go through that entire process digitally. So it's interesting to see the data now starting to back that up.
Yeah, and I think just common sense to some degree. Would we ever want to fully do, a home purchase fully online that you've never seen? You might start, I go on Redfin or Zillow and I look, but do I want realtors calling me? No. Think of any big purchase, and that's what we found. There are similarities in other industries, right? So it's somewhat common sense, but it's also leveraging that technology to make it easier, not only for the consumer, but your team at the dealership.
Yeah, and our slide here, shameless pitch, stop by the booth to test out conversational AI from DAS Technologies perspective.
I think you got to test it. And actually, this isn't a pitch because you can't buy it. Do we still have Sam Splain out there? Yay, you were just there at our booth. You saw it, right? Thumbs up. But she can't buy it. One of our great clients. Because we actually have a contest. So this is fun. We're in Vegas, right? Let's gamble. If you can break our AI bot, you get $100. And we haven't had anybody. You didn't break it, did you, Sam? No, you did not. Oh, okay. Was it a big break? Just a little bit. Okay, good. We just love you. We probably let you break it. But because we want to know. And it's actually okay if you do break it, because then we know we've got something there oh, that's weird. We wouldn't have thought that it could do that. But we're not even selling it. So we like to take our time. And also anything that we do is completely dealership or OEM specific into the guardrails you want as well.
Right.
You may not only want to do it for certain kind of use cases and an if-then scenario.
Right. So a lot of change going on in our industry. I think we have, looking forward, we have 2023. I mean, we all have read the headlines. The sales are starting to rebound. Profitability for you guys is still high, but starting to come back to earth. The dealership buy sells are still at record levels, both valuation and in numbers. And I've been tracking that data since 2013, and it does seem like this year will be another record-breaking year, just based on some of the early gossip that I've heard on the show floor about some of the deals that are coming down the pike. Some notable ones. Valuations, though, are starting to come down a little bit. But the cash is still out there, so I think it's still a seller's market for a little while. We'll see how long that continues. And on the tech M&A side, which really impacts all of the dealers here, as tech companies are acquired or sold, it really does impact at some level, but both good and bad, your business. And having understanding how that is playing out and who those players are, I think is important for the whole dealer community. And last year it was pretty muted. You guys completed an acquisition.
We did 3 birds.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
which was great. Yeah, I think for us, it's just like anything, just like a dealership buy sell.
Right.
The timing has to be right, and the team
Right.
has to be right, and the product.
Right.
So when it makes sense, we're doing them. But and I would agree, we're seeing it with the dealerships too. Exactly what you said, Cliff. That it's still a seller's market, but it's shifting.
It is, yeah, it is. And on the tech side, we likely, depending on what the markets do in terms of the interest rates, I think the jobs market report this week probably puts a little bit of a damper on all the talk about the interest rates coming down because the jobs market was so strong. But at some point, March, April, May, if we do see a reduction in some of those interest rates, that'll probably pop some deals on the tech side, maybe create a couple of IPOs for companies that are waiting to go that route. So I think that's what we're seeing in the rest of the year. Let's talk about EVs for a minute. And Alexa, you have a unique perspective because one, you bought a used Tesla from a dealership.
One of our clients, yep.
And you were one of the first 2,000 people in the country to have a Fisker Ocean.
That's right. And I was actually at a breakfast yesterday with Sebastian from BMW, and he brought up the original BMW i3. And I was very early adopter and got an i3 as well. So that was my starter drug for EVs. I've got a unique perspective. I actually bought that i3 as our 3rd car originally because I thought I need to know what's going. This is a huge shift in our industry. Even if it's not, ramping as quickly, it's ramping, right? We've got to learn. And speaking of consumer communication and messaging and understanding the data, it is just different. I remember when I got that first i3, the F&I manager had no idea what to sell me. They didn't even know their i3. Another one of our clients, I won't say who, and just the warranties didn't make sense. They didn't know how to make money on the vehicle. Now, obviously, that's changed. And then when we bought a pre-owned Tesla, because I wanted to try that and understand the model, not from Tesla, they had one person at the dealership that even knew how to change the title and registration through the app. And I'm like, whoa, okay, this is an opportunity. So we've got to make sure that the people in your dealership actually have driven, know an EV, and can work with those consumers. It's almost like a special department or something. You need that. Now it's changing a bit, but I think that communication is so key to understand. The other thing I've learned, I've never met an EV buyer that went back to gas. We do have a second car. It is a gas car. I don't drive it. I love having an EV.
Right.
I love never going to a gas station, ever. It's probably been 5 years. Like I don't go at all. I've never gone. And I love the convenience of plugging in my house. And when you think about the number of charging locations, people often don't factor in single residents, right? And that is the beauty of it. And if we were a full EV family, I would just rent a car for the longer trips.
Right.
So anyway, it's just very interesting. I absolutely think they need the dealer network. I love that Fisker is going back to dealerships.
Well, to your point there, it's not just Fisker. We saw the Korean automaker. I'm drawing a blank. The ones in North Carolina. No, not Korean. I'm sorry, Vietnamese. And they were all in on direct-to-consumer, and in October announced they are signing dealerships and just signed their first 5, announced that 2 weeks ago. I think we're seeing that around the world, actually. BYD, which is the world's leading EV producer now, they just surpassed Tesla in 2023. BYD is partnering with dealers in Japan, in the UK, and in Europe. They actually have a dealer development office in Southern California, and they are talking to dealer groups today about a potential entrance into the market. But BYD is going the full dealer route as opposed to direct to consumer. We see in Europe, just this past week or last week, Mercedes announced they were selling back their largest retail center to a dealer group, and that's been a trend that's been ongoing since before the pandemic because they can't sell cars profitably, so they're leveraging the dealer market. So last year at NADA, the year before, all the talk was direct to consumer. We were hearing from some of the domestic automakers a lot of noise about that, and I think that's all died down and has gone the way of the dodo bird. I'm telling you, I mean, it's a fallacy that OEMs can do a better job than dealers at retailing cars, and hopefully, we won't see talk like that for a while. It pops up every couple of decades, it seems like, but and the other, I think. The other conversation was last year that we were seeing a lot of that we're not seeing today. I think the whole EV conversation we're talking about, I think that is a conversation that is going to continue. We will not have clarity on that for another 4, 5, 6 years. And so, as manufacturers, I think now are starting to pull back some of their mandates. But I would advise dealers, depending on your market, drag your feet on implementing some of those mandates, EV mandates, because the chargers you put in place today may not be the chargers that are being used 3, 4 years from now, and we still don't know where true customer demand is going to.
Hybrids, hydrogen,
yes,
right? We got a lot going on. So it is a lot even for consumers to understand. Our study, please stop by our booth and pick up a copy of it. It was interesting. 17% of consumers that didn't buy an EV said that once they learned about incentives and someone took the time to explain the true cost and that it was less than they thought, they're actually open to that as their next vehicle. So it's about, again, it's that messaging and your team understanding it. I know it changes regionally. There's different demand. I get it. But whenever there's that chaos and confusion, I always think for the OEM or the dealer or dealer group that helps cut through that confusion and you have a clear, consistent, accurate message you're sending to those consumers, you win. You get that advantage, right? So I like when there's chaos if you're the one that can be the retailer that isn't chaotic in your messaging and actually just explains it. And always have somebody in your store that actually owns an EV, not just demos it occasionally. I'm shocked how many people in our industry want to talk about EVs and they don't own one. And I have a gas, I have an EV, and it's just once you've had one, it's kind of like the landlines. Do you remember when we all had landlines? I haven't had one for a while. And when cell phones came out, and people probably said, "Well, why do you want that phone? My landline works all the time. It's always plugged in. I don't have to go charge it and worried about a battery running out." It kind of reminds me of that. And I am that old to remember pre-cell phones. You got to accommodate both. There's a demographic that I think will, for a long time, want gas and want hybrid, but also the EV buyer. And again, if you were the partner in their transportation journey, they'll be loyal to you. And it's such an edge for you to embrace it and be that person that's helping that consumer understand it. And you'll both benefit.
And one last word on that. There's a lot of chatter in the media about dealers being the roadblock to EV sales. And there was an article yesterday in an online publication where the author argued that for Ford to sell EVs, Ford needs to get rid of its retail network. And the folks in this room, you are the ones that have to change that conversation and that narrative. And that is by being on top of it and putting a good showing, at least in the showroom and in your conversations with your customers. And with that, I think we're out
of time.
Completed. Yes.
This was fun. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, everybody. It is such an interesting, fabulous time to be in our industry. I just love it. So thank you all for joining us for a few minutes today.
Thank you.